So today we're going to be learning a little bit about the history of one laboratory in the biology department called LOBUND. And LOBUND stands for the Laboratory of Bacteriology at the University of Notre Dame, which is the UND part. So we have two speakers today. David Boone is a professor of microbiology and I'm not going to be able to say it, immunology. There we go, made it harder than it was. At Indiana University School of Medicine, South Bend, and an adjunct professor of biology at Notre Dame. And David Acton is a curator of photographs in the Raclin Murphy Museum of Art, and he will discuss the science and art behind these photographs. So I first will welcome Mr. David Acton.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. I want to talk about the artist responsible for these photographs, and then my colleague will talk about the experiments represented here. These are photographs by Eugene Smith, who was really a great master of photographic storytelling in the mid-20th century. And he's particularly interesting for us because he was a Notre Dame student. Not for very long, but he actually studied here. He was born in Nebraska on a farm, and as a kid he became interested in photography, and he also was interested in flying. So he made aerial photographs when he was a teenager, and some of these were published in his hometown newspaper and his high school newspaper. So these photographs actually helped him to get into the university. So he came to the university expecting to study photography and with a scholarship to be a student photographer. So his job was to photograph football games and dances and college life, essentially. And he was very excited about that, and when he got here, he got really involved with sports. And he had a chance with the equipment sponsored by the university to get on the field and to get on the court and to get close to the action for the first time. Very different from making photographs out the window of a plane just clicking like this. So he really began to be interested in capturing moments of action, moments of intensity, and the personalities of the people involved. And that's what excited him, and he became more and more interested in this. And during his first term, he spent most of his time hanging out with the athletes, going to games, and not very much time studying. But he was doing well. Before he came to the university, however, he experienced a great tragedy when his father shot himself, worried about the farm failing in Nebraska. So he came under sort of great stress. The chance to hang out with people, with young people, the chance to sort of get involved in the moment, in the game, in the excitement and energy of what was happening among his peers really took his mind off of his problems. And we know this because he wrote to his mother, and the letters to his mother are still extant, and we can read exactly what he said and exactly how his mood was up and down, how he would complain about sort of having too much work to do, being lonely, being worried about tests, not caring about tests, hanging out with the guys. So we have all that, and it's very typical. But clearly over the first term, he started to think, you know, I like being a photographer more than I like what I might do as a graduate. what I might do in a white-collar job, for example. So this is all clearly expressed in the letters. And so he made it through the first term. He went home at Christmas time to Nebraska, and he came back, and his focus was totally gone. Now he didn't study at all. Now he just hung around with his friends and made photographs of what he considered to be the energy of the moment, of life, of the drama of sport. So he wrote to his mother saying, I think I should be a photographer. Now, at this time, being a photographer, a professional photographer, wasn't an easy thing. Being a baby photographer is something you could work into, but being a news photographer was quite difficult. And so he lasted a few weeks, and he wrote to his mother saying, I really want to give up my scholarship and take the money and go to New York and become a news photographer. And she said, no, stick it out, you'll be good. And he kept sort of hinting that this was his plan. And then one day a letter came from New York. He had split and gone to New York and said, oh, by the way, Mom, I'm in New York, can you send money? I don't know how well that worked out, but he actually transferred and studied for half a year the techniques of photography and also the problems of being a news photographer. Now, this is a period in the late 1930s when news photography and news magazines were very popular. Magazines like Life and Newsweek and Time were popular, and there was a job for these people. Also, photographers were used to selling their photographs to newspapers. So it was a difficult job because if you could get a contract, that was great. Otherwise, you had to get a photograph that was very saleable, and then you had to go to editors, photo editors or art editors, and sell it to them. So not only had to be in the field, but you also had to be friendly in the studios and in the offices of these editors. And Smith was good at being in the field, and he was not very good at selling his photographs, so it was difficult. Nevertheless, eventually he found a job with Newsweek as a stringer, as somebody who would go out and produce a bunch of photographs, send them in, and get paid a minimum salary. That was great. He felt like he was on his way. But he had opinions. He was very headstrong. He was very argumentative. And he was always getting fired. So this went on over the next year. And he was on the job and off the job, having a difficult time in New York City. But still, he was a professional photographer. And then he finally got hired on at Life. This was a serious job as a staff photographer at Life. But again, he was very argumentative. He was getting fired, putting on probation. He would come back. The thing is, he was so good at what he did that they kept turning him back. All the other photographers didn't like him. They thought he was obnoxious. And yet, it was working out for him. So Smith started to think about editorializing, which is to say, he wanted to try to represent these stories of emotion in a sequence of photographs. This was something that didn't really happen. What was happening at the time was if you got one good photograph, that would appear in a newspaper or in a magazine. So think of, well, I'm not sure you guys can think of it, but those of us of a certain age can think about Time magazine, where there would be one picture published for an article. He was thinking of much more. And so he tried to convince people to let him do photo stories. And there was still arguing. During World War II, at the beginning of the war, actually no, toward the later part of the war, after 1941, he joined up and became a photographer for the Army. And he was sent to the Pacific Theater. And there he gained this idea of making photographs in a group. And he would send this group of photographs to Life, and with a clear idea of how he wanted to tell a story with a group of photographs. And he set up a narrative and he sent it to them and, sent captions, told the story, and yet was very disappointed when the story wasn't presented in the way that he wanted. And so this went on. He sent one story about life in the barracks with a bunch of other servicemen. He sent another story about the battle on Okinawa. And he was getting better and better at this, and the photographs were so great that he started to gain some traction. It was on Okinawa that he was working to clear out a part of the jungle where the Japanese, when the Americans arrived, the Japanese had run into the jungle. And so the GIs were out there trying to clean out the jungle and arrest the Japanese. And during this action, he was out photographing, and a mortar was fired. Everybody got down. He stood up, the mortar landed, and a big piece of shrapnel hit him in the face. So he was sent back to the United States, really wounded, and it took him a year or so to actually come back. And during that time, he started taking painkillers. It was very difficult transition, but he actually came back to Life magazine and started to talk to the editors about his ideas about storytelling. And he started to make these long photo essays where, arguing with the photo editors, he worked out the way that a group of photographs, 6 or 8 of them, would be incorporated with captions and also a narrative. And this was the period when he started to make really interesting and impressive photo essays. And this was really the beginning of the idea of the photo essay in the American magazine. This was the period in the late 1940s and into the 50s when these magazines, they were large in format, they were black and white, of course, and they were published every week, and they were sent around to all the subscribers. They were cheap, and so they were really widely published around the country. Now, comparatively, there were other magazines like Stern and Germany and Paris Match, and there were magazines in Italy and magazines in Russia at the same time that had the same format and the same kind of news representation in imagery idea. But Smith was the one who really started to work out the photo essay, and all the other magazines followed in the late 1940s and early 1950s. And Smith got enough money was now paid enough money by Life and sent by the magazine around the world. So he went to Africa to make a photo essay about Albert Schweitzer, the sort of missionary doctor, I think in Gambia, if I recall, and made this long series of photographs about this American doctor and what he was doing. And this became a famous photo essay. He went to several other places. He made a photo essay in the South about a doctor in a small town who would go out and sort of minister to the people of that town, and made this very famous series of a small town doctor, and another one about a midwife in another small town. And then he went to Spain and made a photo series of life in Spain. And you may recognize some of these famous images and famous series. And from time to time during this period in the late 1940s, Smith would come back to Notre Dame to visit, and he would make photographs around campus. Some of them he tried to represent as photo series, and sometimes he would just make photographs of people he had known. He made a series on Father Ted. He made a series on the football team. So he was still kind of doing the same thing in a comfortable place, and he felt at home at Notre Dame. And that's where this LOBUND series came in. It was 1947. He came and proposed this series to the editors of Life magazine, and came and spent a couple of months, I think, here, making photographs in the lab. And David will tell you when he gets here where the lab was and what it looked like. And the building is still there and the spaces are still there, but all of the equipment has moved out and it's totally different. You guys may know the spaces, actually. You know, they have these ceramic bricks on the walls, and so it's very 40s, 50s, post-war architecture. And Smith got to know the scientists, got to know what they were doing, started to write about them, and the images he made were the images surrounding this series of experiments, and ended up as a series called Life Without Germs. They were working on the idea of nurturing animals that were born in an antiseptic environment and never had any relationship to the outside world and never experienced any kind of germs in the environment. And so that was what was going on here. And he made pictures of, you know, the scientists themselves and tried to represent their various personalities. He made pictures of their experiments. And even the machine shop at Notre Dame, where they created the equipment to keep these animals in. And I hesitate to go on because this is the subject of my partner. But, you know, you got me here alone. So there are experiments with baby chicks, with rats, with little monkeys, rhesus monkeys, I think. And the scientists, before they went into the antiseptic chambers, wore these rubber suits and took showers. And so this, my favorite photograph from the series, shows that these young college kids were goofing around, and this looks like somebody in a 1950s space movie or something. But it gives us a wonderful image of not only of what science was like at the time, what the equipment was like at the time, but also a little bit still of what college life was like at the time. So one of the things they did was bring up rats in this environment. And part of the experiments had to do with creating a kind of milk to feed these baby rats that was full of the nutrition that they needed, but was totally without germs. And so a couple of the photographs are about these guys who are working to develop this, this milk, for lack of a better word, to feed these baby rats. And some of these photographs are clearly posed. For example, here's a baby chick in a jar, and the jar doesn't seem to be attached to anything, but I could be wrong. But here's the chick isolated, and a flask is here seemingly attached to it. And this was staged. This photograph represents one of the scientists before a projected slide. So in another group of photographs, we can see him making a slide lecture with this slide on the screen, and then when it appeared in the magazine, it was cut and pasted so that this was the image that was represented in the magazine. This is an interesting thing because Smith was very much against this. He was very much against playing around with the photographs. He wanted them exactly as he took them, and he didn't like them to be cropped, and he wanted them to be in the exact order to tell the kind of story he conceived. And this continued for years, fighting with the editors, getting put on suspension, coming back, creating genius work, and so on and so on. During this time, Smith also started teaching, and he was teaching this idea of setting up photographic narrative. And it was very popular in New York at the New School as a professor, as a visiting professor, as a teacher. And this is the beginning, really, of narrative photography in the United States. And these other journals around the world actually spun off of this. And if you look at French photography from the late 1940s, a new kind of photography grows up which seeks to tell a story, but does so in a rather dreamy and romantic way. So instead of something very basic and representing the world as it really is, there's a lot of sort of rainy days with couples embracing and things like that. And so that field of romantic photography was something very different, and a great many famous French photographers grew up during this period, being inspired by W. Eugene Smith. So he continued to do this, and went to Japan and took a woman who was a young student with him, who was sort of mixed race, had a Japanese father, I think, or might be one parent who was Japanese and one parent who was American. She was fluent in both languages, of course, and he took her to Japan, and they worked on a series around Minamata. Minamata was a village that was organized around a fishing plant, and that fishing plant where they caught fish and packaged them for consumption was a place where successive generations of people were exposed to mercury from fish, from the fishing, and from the industrial process. And successive generations were plagued by deformed children. And this crisis was something that Smith and his now wife, Eileen, who went there as his student, became deeply involved with. And they made photographs in the community, in the plant, and tried to represent Minamata and what had happened there in words and pictures. And they were also involved with protests around the plant against the company. And in one of these protests, Smith was punched in the face or hit in the head, and the injuries from World War II started to bother him again, and he found it very difficult to come back. He really started to need drugs to fight off the pain. And yet, they came back to the United States, moved to Los Angeles, and the picture book about Minamata was published. This was in the late 60s, I believe. And from that point, Smith had enough to sort of retire from working as a photographer, and he moved to New York, and he was really interested in jazz music. And so he rented a loft in the Lower East Side on the top of a building, and in this loft he had a photography studio, and it was big enough to have a sort of a place for jazz musicians to come and hang out. And it became a famous hangout place in the 60s and 70s, where these jazz musicians would come after hours. So at sort of 2 or 3 in the morning, they would come, hang around, meet all their friends there from different clubs, start jamming, and just sort of spend the rest of the night and the morning. Smith took photographs of them, made films of them, and also started making audio tapes of them. And he made tens of thousands of photographs in the jazz loft, as it was called, and hundreds of hours of tapes of these guys hanging around and jiving with each other and also playing. And this became really a great sort of document of this period and many of the greatest American jazz musicians of the period. And that was eventually edited into a film, and you can get this film online still. It's called The Jazz Loft. It's an hour and a half long, and it's really terrific. And it gives you a sense of what that world was like, and also what Smith was like at the very end of his life. He was still argumentative, he was still opinionated, he was still very productive and incredibly creative, and that was really his last work. eventually he sort of deteriorated with drug addiction, and by that I mean addiction to painkillers, and he died there in New York. So that is a much longer story than I meant to tell you about Eugene Smith. Yes, please.
I'm a retired biology professor. I'd be happy to do just 5 minutes on the biology. Would that be of any interest?
Well, I don't really know about it, so
Yeah, so he's offering to do it. He's offering to do it.
please.
I do apologize, Dr. Boone could not make it.
Professor, here. Karen, will you get you on Yeah, I'm not sure it's with recording, but I'll...
It definitely
I'm
is.
doing this off the cuff.
Hey, we just had 20 minutes of that.
Thank you very much. It was
David
wonderful.
Acton.
What a story.
Thank you.
What a
Thanks for
story.
saving me.
And when was this published?
1947.
That early, okay. Yeah, I don't know a lot, folks. I actually specialize in diseases of poverty. So not much connection, but I will say, which picture? This picture brought me to Notre Dame. So I somehow, when I was a nerdy 6-year-old, so I was born 11 years after this picture was taken, but somehow in the early 60s, reading the encyclopedia or something like that, that picture caught my imagination. Then I said, Notre Dame? And that's the day I wanted to come to Notre Dame, and now I've spent my whole life here. I'll be buried here, for that matter.
Did you think it was serious, or did you think it was kind of funny?
No, I think it's the drama that Smith brought to life. Yeah. It's, I thought it was a spaceship, right, or science fiction. And it's brilliant, but it affected my life very dramatically. The power of photography and the power of Smith's creativity, which you so well described, and how it interfered with the practical aspects of life. So that's a lesson to you who have creative sides, and that don't let that kind of thing, don't let other people stop you. Stay determined. What a great story for Notre Dame, about Notre Dame. He probably, we weren't really a real artistic school back then when he was a student here, so I don't think we were known for fine arts. Now, St. Mary's was for creative. Well, Sister Madaleva was a poet, the most famous president of St. Mary's, if I might say. Anyway, just a little bit about the biology, folks. LOBUND really only kind of went out of existence maybe 10 years ago. There are people that still work on research threads that started then. But someday, my theory is, you young people, mark my words, this will be as important as the discovery of synthetic rubber, which was done here at Notre Dame. This will be the work of Professor Rainiers and so many others. And there's a building way back by the laundry, if you want to go back there, Rainiers Hall. And like you said, it's the 40s architecture, tile, and post-war. So Professor Rainiers was a brilliantly creative man as well. And I'll just list maybe 4 threads that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there are many more, but the cancer research that this technique, laboratory technique of germ-free animals led to is a line of research that has informed cancer across the field, which is really many fields for the study of cancer, of course. And one of our most distinguished professors, Morris Pollard, died maybe 11 years ago, so I'm thinking that might have been when things tailed off. He was 97 or 98. Another one of the professors, Wastman, lived past 100. So maybe there's something about germ-free environments that have you live a long time. Who knows? There you go. There you go. Like that. So that's one line, the cancer research. Another thing was restricted diet that these studies allowed, and that longevity. So longevity is a big topic, right, today in the culture. Dr. Peter Attia and the Huberman Lab, those are very popular podcasts on longevity. Restricted diet is an idea that started in these laboratories and research that was pursued at Notre Dame because of this field, which was called notobiology, G-N-O-T-O biology, if you want to write that down. I don't know if the term was invented here, but if you Google it, it'll say Notre Dame right away. And then the third thing, and probably the most important, is how many of you know what the microbiome is? That line of work would never have started anywhere else than if credit can't be given here to this work. And what they soon discovered in this work was that the animals did not thrive without their microbiome. And now we know why, because it's so influential in epigenetics, in inherited traits that has revolutionized biology and genetics in the last 20 years. That's why I say this is so huge, and will turn out to be more so. I'm almost over time. The last one of interest to the females, maybe, is that one of the doctoral students that worked in this area was chosen by Father Hesburgh. Her name was Sister John Miriam Jones, Sister of Charity. And when she and Sister Jean Lenz, who was a Franciscan sister, were given the task of implementing coeducation. And along with the brave, courageous women who came from St. Mary's and were the first women admitted, it was not easy with all the machoism around here. They did a good job. They did a great job. And I would say, you know, Father Hesburgh's vision is just part of it. It really was Sister John Miriam. And again, she wouldn't have been here if she came to be a microbiologist and studied this area. Just one little anecdote for the end. When Professor Rainier's left in the 50s somewhere, I don't remember exactly where, and if any of you are undergrads and you want a research credit, let me know, because I want to write some of this stuff up, and someone has to do the digging. But, you know, it could fit into art, or it could fit into science, or it could fit into history, so, you know, the history of Notre Dame is important to all of us, probably. Dr. Rainier's went to Florida, and with a doctor, I'm blanking on his name right now, and I'm going to see his widow for Thanksgiving. Terrible. I better look up her name. Anyway, she's in her 90s now. They founded a company called, guess what? Germ-free. And they made bazillions. And the guy for whom this Museum of Science and Industry is now named, Griffin, he bought this germ-free company 2 or 3 years ago for an undisclosed amount. I went to visit germ-free. It's in Ormond Beach. The main campus is in Ormond Beach, but the Saudis have built a facility there. So they build laboratories, mobile laboratories, portable laboratories, movable, semi-permanent laboratories for the whole world, and they're the best at it. And but the most fun thing is, where are those tanks at? These tanks. There's some stainless steel ones. I was wandering around outside of the germ-free campus there. If they gave me a tour, it was my first visit there. And LOBUND on this huge stainless steel engraved, LOBUND, and then a little tag, property of the University of Notre Dame, number 246810. Do not remove. Without permission of Father so-and-so. But anyway, it was no longer being used for a sterilization chamber. It was cut in half, and there was a handle. It was the grill for the hamburgers on Friday. I have a picture of that if anyone wants that. Maybe you guys do. Sorry, that's not real scientific, but a little bit. Thank you. Thanks for being open to it.
Thank you.
Just have one question.
Sure.
A couple of people may have questions. It looks like we have a couple of questions in the audience.
Yes.
You said that he came and visited campus repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
Are any of his photos in the collection of either the museum or the Notre Dame archives?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know what there is in the archives, but in the museum collection, we also have portraits by him. We have not many. We have a handful of creative photographs that come from the magazine projects. including some of the most famous, and a group of portraits of Father Ted and some other things. There may well be photographs in the archives as well at Hesburgh Library. So the answer was yes. Sir?
Yeah, I was, excuse me, I graduated in 1969. So when we were here, Morris Pollock was sort of the superstar.
Yes.
And weren't they germ-free mice, not rats?
We had all kinds of germ-free animals.
Okay.
I think he used different models. I don't think he used mice only, but
It was the big, the Notre Dame germ-free mice were a real big.
a brand. Yeah, they were.
in the industry.
Yeah.
Huh.
Another thing from the dark ages.
I was curious to know as to who was the inventor of synthetic rubber here? Was that Father Zahn?
It was a postdoc of his, but he gets Father Zahn gets all, Father Newland gets all the credit, which is okay.
I'm going to give Father Newland credit.
Hey, another part of that story, if you want a little anecdote. The rumor is Father Newland was completely focused, we could barely get him to come back for Mass and prayers and meals even. He died at only 58, contrary to the way he's depicted as an old man in Newt Rockney, All-American. It's not the right sequence of events. But anyway, he got, I don't know, $40,000, which was a huge sum back then, from DuPont. And then he signed away everything that he discovered. And because he didn't care, we didn't have anyone watching, any dean's office watching things like that, which he probably needed as a very creative scientist. And we still get, I think it's $200,000 a year.
Mm-hmm, something like that. They were really
Very consistent.
our first, kind of benefactors, honestly, because
And it was a huge amount.
it was a lot of money at the time.
But someone calculated one year how much our endowment would be if we had a reasonable fair deal with DuPont. And it's $9 billion was the last I heard.
He
So.
traded it for books. He just wanted chemistry books. So
And glassware.
Yes.
And glassware.
He just wanted stuff for the lab rather than the money.
Thank you. Raphael Wilson, you didn't mention.
I didn't. Oh, what a shame.
So he was one of the original ones in the germ-free, and he did The Boy in the Bubble.
Okay, that's right.
Down in Houston.
Sure enough.
I don't know if he was with the University of Texas working with The Boy in the Bubble. And The Boy in the Bubble wanted to become a brother or a priest because of his influence.
And the actor that played him also wanted to be a priest or a brother. Priest. You know who that is? John Travolta. Oh. Too much trivia, folks. You see, I have too much time on my hands.
It's really descending now, I'm afraid.
Does anyone have any additional questions?
Yes.
What did Smith's photo series in Okinawa focus on? Like, what were the subjects of the photos?
They were essentially battle photographs. He spent time in the trenches with the troops, and most of them were battle photographs in the jungle, and moving around and arresting the Japanese. And we have one photograph in the collection, which is his most famous Okinawa photograph, which you may know, which represents a GI holding up a baby, a Japanese infant that the soldiers found secreted in the jungle. And we have a copy of that photograph, and that was published in Life and became very famous.
Is that series available online?
I'm sure it is, yeah. In fact, all of these photo essays you can find online now. And we also have a great run of original Life magazines in Hesburgh. So if you want to look at the way they originally looked, separated by, corny cigarette ads and things like that. You can go and look at them in the library.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Sorry that Dr. Boone couldn't be here, but
Thanks
thank
for
you all
coming, everybody.
Raphael Wilson.